There is something deeply unsettling about an old house at night. What is beautiful, if a bit worse for wear during the day, can take on a sinister cast once the sun goes down. The moan of the wind outside, the creak of the floorboards, the scraping of a branch against a window. Maybe one of these sounds jolts you awake in the dead of night, eyes opening to a room full of shadows turned twisted and eerie in the darkness. Of course, it's probably nothing supernatural, just an old house settling mixed with your own paranoia. But sometimes, every so often, it is something more. Sometimes you're not as alone in an old house as you think you are. That's certainly the case if you ever find yourself staying in SCP-2696, also known as the Haunted Victorian Mansion of Dark Peak. In 1869, wealthy and renowned industrialist and scholar of the occult Henry Percival Rosyth built a stately home, known as Rosyth Hall, to house him, his wife Clara, and any children they might have in the future. It was constructed to provide Henry with ample space to conduct his arcane research, Clara with a beautiful sitting room and a flower garden to tend, and their future children with lots of space to play and run around as they grew. After an uneventful year in the house, Clara gave birth to 2 baby boys, named Edgar and Miles. For a time, the family was happy there. Unfortunately, this happiness was to be short-lived, as the grim specter of death soon began to loom over Rosyth Hall. In January of 1873, Clara was overcome with a sudden fever and died in her bed. This loss pushed the already eccentric Henry over the edge, and he began making strange changes to the house's interior structure. He added hallways that led to dead ends, strangely angled floors, and twisting corners, turning a once comfortable and lived-in home into something unrecognizable. In August of that same year, Henry's children Edgar and Miles also suddenly passed away, leaving Henry alone at his estate as he continued his descent into madness. He kept modifying the house, expanding from the mansion's library and tower to the rest of the building's rooms. Henry's days were spent supervising the construction around the house, refusing to let the workers carry on without his strict oversight, worried that otherwise his vision would be corrupted. His nights were spent sleepless as he worked away in the tower and in the nursery on the 2nd floor. No one was permitted to witness his work during the night, but his household staff complained of strange sounds, flashing lights, and strange whispers. Many were so unsettled by these sounds and Mr. Rosyth's erratic behavior that they quit their jobs without notice. A wise choice given the circumstances. As his staff dwindled, so too did Henry Rosyth's already fragile grip on reality. His requests for materials became more and more imposing. He demanded 200 kilograms of ground stone from Isle of Anglesey in Wales, and 37 meters of pipes made from an amalgam of mercury and copper, among other unconventional materials. But Rosyth still had money to burn, and no family to spend it on anymore, so his every strange request was accommodated, for a time anyway. In June of 1876, exhausted and unsettled by the long hours of work, the ever-increasingly strange projects, and the unusual supernatural phenomena around the house, the remainder of Rosyth's workers quit. He then fired all of his household staff, with the exception of his loyal housekeeper, and resumed his work in solitude. Though the specifics of just what Mr. Rosyth was trying to achieve would likely have gone to the grave with him, some of his diary entries were recovered from the house, and they provide a peek into his motives and nature of the mansion's anomalous activity. After the death of his wife and children, he became obsessed with the concept of the mind-made body. The notion that having a memory so strong that, if given the proper energetic conditions, it could take on corporeal form. His theory was, if a memory is engraved permanently in the mind, it could then take on a permanent physical and energetic manifestation. He began to experiment with this concept, determined to bring back a form of his wife and children by any means necessary, a noble pursuit that paved the way for madness. It is during this process that he began to remodel the house in order to provide the ideal energetic conditions for his memories to be made material. Eventually, his notes devolved into nonsense, and the pages were covered with geometric equations and blood. His final entry reads, "The children still speak in her voice. I fear I might be going mad." It is true that he might have been losing his grip on sanity towards the end of his experiments, but his work undeniably filled the house with something. It was not long before reports of strange sights and sounds around the Rosyth home reached the ears of those trained to investigate such matters. The house and its anomalous nature were initially discovered by Jitinder Jaishankar, an occultist and investigator employed by the Royal Foundation for the Secure Containment of the Paranormal, or RFSCP. He wrote the first official report on the house in 1876, after investigating multiple rumors of ghostly sightings around the house. He and his team, a married pair of ghost hunters named the Bartons, arrived at the Rosyth home with a sense of apprehension. They were ushered through the door by a housekeeper, who made the eerie promise that Henry Rosyth would be with them shortly. When the master of the house came to greet them, the investigative team was shocked by his appearance. He was gaunt, almost skeletal, with a dark, deep-set eyes bleary from entirely too long without sleep. He looked as if he had aged 100 years in the few years since his wife's death. The team stayed the night in the house, experiencing a restless and nightmare-addled sleep until 2:30 a.m., when the investigative work was to begin. They descended down to the main hall of the house, where a large black door was all that stood between them and the unknown. It opened with a bone-deep groan, as if to warn them not to enter, but still they stepped inside. Once they crossed the threshold, they were greeted with odd angles, a garish array of colors and materials, and bewilderingly high ceilings. All to Mr. Rosyth's very demanding specifications, of course. He spared no expense in making his nonsensical nightmare house an unsettling reality. The Bartons presented dowsing rods, which they used to measure spiritual activity in the room. At first, nothing happened, but soon the dowsing rods began to spark viciously, and a sudden gust of wind blew out all the candles in the room. There was nothing but darkness, and a sudden sense of a heavy presence among them. The Bartons dropped to the floor, with Mrs. Barton leaking blood from her mouth and Dr. Barton convulsing violently. The presence grew stronger, and though it did not speak, it was unmistakable who it was. It was the deceased Clara Rosyth. Jaishankar fled the manor, dragging his unconscious companions out as fast as he could. Once safely away from the mansion, he immediately contacted the RFSCP, well, as quickly as one can when communicating by telegram. A second team was sent to investigate the house in the following days, but when they arrived, Henry Rosyth could not be found. There was no sign of a struggle, no body. He simply vanished. He was never seen again. The SCP Foundation has an official record of two separate incorporeal entities that dwell within the walls of SCP-2696. The first, SCP-2696-1, appears to be the ghost or memory, energetic signature, whatever you wish to call it, of Clara Rosyth. The apparition is the one that Jitinder Jaishankar and the Bartons encountered. She is translucent and intangible, and most frequently appears in the form of Clara as a young mother at the pinnacle of her good health. She has also occasionally taken on several inhuman forms, including a wilting plumeria bush and a disturbing column of bone, muscle, and flesh. Exposure to the Clara entity has a pronounced negative effect on anyone who comes near her. People that come within several feet of SCP-2696 have reported mild visual and auditory hallucinations, such as creeping shadows and whispering voices chanting in foreign languages. There have also been reports of amnesia, fainting, seizures, bleeding from the nose, mouth, and ears, and in the most severe cases, dissociative episodes that result in complete losses of identity. Many of these physical side effects are thought to be the result of the massive amounts of radiation that have been measured being given off by the entity. The second entity in the house, known as SCP-2696-2, is actually two entities that always seem to come as a pair. Known as 2A and 2B, these are the skeletons of Miles and Edgar Rosyth, the deceased children of Clara and Henry. They are located inside of the nursery, which is inaccessible to outsiders, with a door that seems able to seal itself shut at will and keep researchers out. The two skeletons are largely inactive, remaining on the floor of the nursery in the fetal position at nearly all times. They only become active during periods of extreme activity from the Clara entity. When Clara is especially active and attempting to leave her usual domain in the house's tower, the skeletons have been reported to wrestle and play with each other, dance around the room, or stand at the door to the nursery, appearing to be waiting for something. One notable occasion, though, on June 12, 1990, Both instances of SCP-2696-2 were able to actually leave the nursery and travel elsewhere in the house. A series of massive lightning strikes raised the energy levels in the house, and Clara's radiation levels suddenly spiked significantly. Surge protectors placed in the house failed, and Clara became more active than usual, transforming into a swirling dark mass that emitted an ear-splitting shriek. The front door of the mansion slammed itself shut and refused to open, trapping the research team who were present at the time. They were only able to exit after SCP-2696-2A and 2B were spotted leaving the nursery. Hand in hand, they approached Clara and opened their arms to her. Pacified, perhaps by some distant echo of a mother's love, the entity quieted, and the Foundation team was finally able to leave. It is still unknown how 2A and 2B were able to leave the nursery, but there have not been any incidences of this level since. Currently, the Dark Peak Mansion remains standing, and is largely untouched from how its creator left it. The SCP Foundation maintains a strict perimeter of 1 square kilometer around the house, and no civilians are permitted to cross it. Not only is the building restricted for civilians, most SCP personnel are also forbidden from entering the house. Some of the only ones who are allowed inside are a special class of SCP Foundation personnel, Experimental Containment Research Group, or ECRG, and MTF Theta 77, nicknamed Who You Gonna Call. Given what was learned in the 1990 activation event, it is apparent that the containment procedures have a rate of failure that does not adequately contain SCP-2696-1, and according to the containment file, there is a 47% chance of Clara breaching containment completely by 2030. Catherine Stedman once wrote, "Houses aren't haunted, people are." Henry Rosyth was so haunted by the loss of his beloved wife and children that he could not stand to live in his big, empty house all alone. Henry Rosyth may be long gone, but his attempts to grasp at that which was long gone before him have forever changed the house he built. His grief, his pain, his energy filled the house with echoes of his loved ones, and as pain often does when left untreated, it began to fester and turn foul. Dr. Henry Rosyth was a deeply haunted man, and now his haunted house is all that remains of him. Now go check out SCP-1730 What Happened to Site-13 the full story compilation, and SCP-1337 The Hitchhiker for more anomalies that'll chill you to the bone.